Before I move on to Korean art, a few housekeeping items. The video on the Great Leap Forward is now up on Moodle. I realize that this is a long chunk to recommend, but it's an incredibly important episode in modern history, so think about watching it, okay? Some of you already know that I messed up the link on socialist realism. Here's the correct link, and it's fixed on Moodle. The Cultural Revolution poster on the right is almost as famous and was reproduced almost as many times as the Chairman Mao en route to Anyuan. I could really imagine it showing up as an attribution question. The poster on the left is an example of Soviet socialist realism. It was really communist Russia that inaugurated this art movement. But socialist realism did influence art in Europe and America as well. You've probably seen the We Can Do It poster before. This is sometimes called American realism, but I'll bet you can see the resemblance, including the dramatic use of what technique to show depth? Foreshortening. Okay, let's climb into our time machines, punch in Korea, and travel back about 1,500 years. I know embarrassingly little about Korean history before the 19th century, although I know more now than I did a couple of days ago. This little clip from the Korean History Channel will give you some introduction to the kingdom that ruled large chunks of Korea for 900 years. It also gives you a quick look at Korean Buddhist art, which is missing from our required images, even though it was Korea that sent Buddhism to Japan. You'll also hear an argument that the Koreans borrowed the golden ratio and improved on it, a reminder that many cultures have similar but subtly different canons of proportion. Now, the Khan Academy essay on this work was short and I thought especially informative, so I'm not going to just repeat everything you have, I hope, just read. Instead, let's play Second Guess the College Board. Why do you think they included this work? How does it fit in with some of the College Board's favorite themes? Well, there's an interesting dispute over its function. The crown was found in the royal tomb shown here, and the gold is so thin and fragile that art historians originally thought it must have been used only as a burial ornament. It simply wouldn't withstand regular wear. Certainly, this buried item provides still more evidence that many cultures anticipated a rich afterlife and wanted their ruling elite, at least, to be well equipped for it. We've seen that before, right? The fragility notwithstanding, the crown may have had another function in addition to equipping a Korean royalty for the afterlife. Let me read a passage from an Asian art textbook that I've been consulting as I prepare this lecture. Quote, "The indigenous belief system developed by the ancient Koreans was a type of shamanism resembling that practiced in Siberia." And by the way, the Koreans are thought to have originally come from Siberia. Korean shamanism also shares elements with Japanese Shinto. For example, animistic worship of celestial phenomena such as the sun or earthly features such as mountains. And here's from a Korean studies blog. The structure of these elaborate crowns clearly depicts trees, antlers, and other facets of nature, all of which are items of great importance to the spiritual ideas of shamanism in Korea. These crowns also evoke the simpler but similar designs of headdresses worn by shamans in what is now Siberia. And I took an image from the website and put it up. So some scholars propose that Silla kings took the role of kind of state shaman, an intermediary with the spirits on behalf of their people. Shamanism, by the way, persists in Korea in a ceremony that's called the gut, I may be mispronouncing that, in which shamans, often women, serve as intercessors for people who want the help of the spirit world to invoke good fortune or to cure illnesses by exorcising evil spirits. Sometimes such services are held to help guide the spirit of a deceased person to heaven. So I've included a photo of a mushang, or shaman, leading a gut. Notice that there's some similarity between the headdresses. The crown again includes 3 tree-shaped vertical elements that probably represent the sacred tree that once stood in the ritual precinct of, I'm not going to try to pronounce that, but I've circled it. This sacred tree was conceived of as a world tree or an axis mundi, connecting heaven and earth. So, where have we encountered the concept or the images of an axis mundi before? Well, think of the Yasti on top of the Great Stupa at Sanchi and the Garbhagriha at the Lakshmana Temple in India, both in India. So the two antler-shaped protrusions may refer to the reindeer that were native to the Eurasian steppe, lying to the north of the Korean peninsula, and those dangling gold discs and jade ornaments called goguk symbolize ripe fruits hanging from tree branches. That is fertility and abundance, which was probably what the Korean kings were interceding to get for their people. Now, the Khan Academy essay also included a photo of still another Central Asian crown that was found at a nomad gravesite in Afghanistan, so we see even more evidence of cultural borrowing. So this one has it all. It adds another country to our list. Its function is intriguingly ambiguous. It includes a performance art element and shamanism, both beloved of the College Board. It reflects cross-cultural influences between Central Asia and China. The early Korean and Chinese dynasties had similar burial customs, right? It even includes an artistic role for women. And the crown is stunningly beautiful. I am not complaining about this work being on our list, but I have to make fun of the College Board from time to time, right? In the 7th century, so just a little later than the crown we just examined, the Silla kingdom conquered Korea's other two kingdoms and formed an alliance and strong trading relationship with the Tang dynasty of China. So did Japan in the same period. Remember that the Tang dynasty was the height of Buddhism in China, state-sponsored Buddhism. Under the Silla rulers, Buddhism also became the dominant religion in Korea and the state religion. So, just to have a little more comparison, here are 3 versions of those guardian figures, or Nyo or Vajrapani. They were the historical Buddha's bodyguards. So the one on the bottom is Korean. It's located in a 7th century temple, although the figures themselves were created later. Do you remember where the other 2 were found? Well, the one on the top left is from the Longmen Caves in Luoyang, China, and the one on the top right is from the Tudaiji Temple in Nara, Japan. By the way, when the Tudaiji Temple was formally consecrated, Tang Dynasty officials were in attendance, along with emissaries from Korea and Persia, and the blessing was said by a monk from India. The original Great Buddha at Todaiji was designed by a Korean artist. Globalization is not a new phenomenon. Strong ties to the Tang Dynasty also brought Confucianism to Korea, and in 958 Korea actually adopted a civil service examination system very similar to China's, and also based on knowledge of Confucian texts. Buddhism did remain the Korean state religion. The Silla kingdom disintegrated in the 9th century, partly because its ally, the Chinese Tang Dynasty, was also falling apart and couldn't come to their aid. But a new dynasty took charge, and when China revived under the Sung Dynasty, so did Chinese-Korean ties. Also, like China, Korea was conquered by the Mongols and was in fact ruled by the Chinese-Mongol or Yuan dynasty for close to 100 years. In 1392, and you do not need to know all these dates, I'm just trying to give you a sense of the sweep of history. But in 1392, another Korean dynasty, the Joseon, took power, and they ruled into the 20th century. This dynasty, seeing a theme here, formed strong ties with the Chinese dynasty that was ruling at the same time. So, anyone remember what Chinese dynasty was ruling then? It was the Ming dynasty, and the Ming rulers actually helped the Koreans repel an invasion from Japan. So the portrait on the left dates from the Joseon dynasty, and it shows the influence of Neo-Confucianism on Korean painting. Korean elites were very enthusiastic practitioners of Chinese painting, poetry, and music, or to use a term you learned in an earlier lecture, they were literati. The portrait on the right is in fact a Ming Dynasty portrait of a high Chinese official from about the same period. So what common features do you notice? Well, they're both seated in full-length view. They're both dressed in official robes with those rather silly-looking official black silk hats. So these are government-sponsored portraits. They're official portraits. They both include a rank badge as an embroidered insignia on their robes. Now, the Khan Academy essay says that while the Korean portrait followed Neo-Confucian conventions, quote, the facial features were painted with the goal of transmitting a sense of unique physical likeness. Our experts go on to say that this careful attention to the sitter's face, such as wrinkles and bone structure, served the Korean belief that the face could reveal important clues about the subject. Well, this made me curious. Is this only true of Korean court painting that's Neo-Confucian? So I started geeking out and looking at websites that showed Ming Dynasty Chinese portraits, and I put one of the sites on this slide and up on Moodle. So here's a Ming Dynasty bureaucrat's face, along with another one I found on this website. What do you think? I think it would be very hard to tell the difference between Korean and Chinese court portraits of the same era, but I'm not an expert. Anyway, here are 3 more Korean portraits. Wondering about the one on the right? According to the gallery website where I found it, Korean artist Dong Eun-son has, quote, opened up a new chapter in Oriental painting through a special melding of traditional Korean portrait techniques and mass culture popular icons. Me, I'm amazed the College Board missed that one. And by the way, official portraits live on. My husband needs to have his portrait painted for the courthouse of the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals in Denver, where he served as a judge before returning to academia. An artist came out to our cabin this summer for a couple of days to make preliminary sketches, and here's one of them. The artist suggested that the painting might include the most beautiful member of our family. As you will see, my husband agreed. Before we leave Korea, let me just remind you about the global contemporary work on the left, which is another work that shows the strong connection between Chinese and Korean artistic culture. So I'm going to pause here again to spare YouTube too rich a diet of images. In my final lecture, I will move on to Japan.